Unlike other retrospectives on this channel, we're beginning straight at the SNES. The Mega Man X series is regarded as one of the best action platformers ever, taking the formula from the classic series and giving it a fresh coat of paint. If you asked any retro gaming enjoyer what's one of the best games on the SNES, Mega Man X1 is bound to be mentioned in that conversation. The series stands in this weird limbo of being a pseudo-spiritual successor to the classic series, while also technically being a spin-off. Even after X1 released, that didn't stop Capcom from still releasing classic Mega Man games, with the 7th entry being released on the same console 2 years after X1. So if anything, both series coexisted simultaneously, and I can only imagine Mega Man fans were eating pretty good back in the day. From X5 to X8, the series in my opinion would take a nosedive in quality, chronologically concluding with X8. Though that wouldn't be the end of the X series story because later on we got the Zero series, but that's a story for another day. As for where do I fit into this equation, well, back in the day, I used to own the Mega Man X collection on the PS2. It was one of my favorite games I owned, and I played X1 through X5 to death, only beating X6 one time. When the Legacy Collection was released, I not only was able to revisit old games I loved as a kid, but also complete X7 and X8 for the first time. With that being said, this entire retrospective will be recorded on the first Legacy Collection. This video isn't sponsored, but if you want a convenient way to play the X series, the Legacy Collections are a solid choice. I'm recording this off of Steam, and thanks to sales, getting these isn't a strain on your wallet, though I can't speak for the other platforms. Either way, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dive into Mega Man X1. Mega Man X1 makes its debut letting you know this isn't your dad's Mega Man. In the 22nd century, Dr. Kane, a brilliant robotic scientist with a penchant for archaeology, discovers a sealed capsule in an underground laboratory once belonging to Dr. Thomas Light. Inside the capsule was the humanoid robot named Mega Man X, or X for short. X was unlike anything Dr. Kane had seen before, because you see, X contained a characteristic that made him unique to other robots, the ability to think for himself. Dr. Light, believing that the world was not ready for X, sealed them away for the past 30 years to undergo strict ethical testing. X, now awoken, agrees to allow Dr. Kane to study his internal systems, and later that year, the first Reploid is created, and Reploids enter mass production, ushering in a new age. However, what should be revolutionary technology begins to cause a new set of problems. For one, new Reploids never underwent the strict ethical testing X endured. As a result, some Reploids experience a glitch, causing them to become Maverick, or irregular in the Japanese translation. Mavericks are Reploids who become hostile and begin attacking humans and other Reploids. With a new threat emerging in the world, the Maverick Hunters are created to act as a police force and combat the Maverick threat. Sigma, once the Maverick Hunters' leader, goes Maverick and begins a rebellion against humanity to establish a new order of Reploid dominance. X1 is very light when it comes to its story. In the SNES version, there's a brief explanation to the origins of X, however, context like Sigma's rebellion and the creation of Reploids was expanded upon through supplementary material, like the Day of Sigma OVA for X1's PSP remake. It's a solid OVA, not only showing the beginning of Sigma's rebellion, but it also highlights some of the Maverick Hunters you'll be fighting in-game. To go back to the original, pressing the start button will begin the highway intro. Up there is one of the best openings in video game history. I've said it before, but any game that throws you into the action once you start is the hallmark of any great game. You'll control X as you battle your way through the highway, making sure to take down the helicopters that try to get in your way. I'll be honest, when I recorded my third playthrough, one of the helicopters did a missile attack. I bring this up because I've been playing X1 since I was a kid and I've never encountered this attack. I also love how if you don't jump on the middle platform but the other two, it'll collapse, showing great attention to detail. At the end, a giant airship appears, dropping off Boba Fett wannabe Vile. Vile is an unwinnable fight, and right when he's got X in his grasp, backup arrives. That's how you introduce the character right there. Zero is another member of the Maverick Hunters and acts as a mentor and friend to X. After giving X a pep talk, the two heroes split up with X given the task of neutralizing the 8 Mavericks loyal to Sigma, and Zero locating Sigma's base. Mega Man X1 follows the same formula established in the classic series. You're given a choice between 8 stages with a boss at the end. And what I've always enjoyed about the Mega Man series was its commitment to approach stages in a non-linear order. In every X1 playthrough, like so many others, I always chose to do Chill Penguin stage first. Every Maverick has unique stages that cater to their characteristics. Chill Penguin stage, for example, is set in a frozen landscape. In the classic series, stages were slower paced, valuing precision shooting and tight platforming. The X series still retains that methodology, however, there's more of an emphasis on run and gun platforming this time around. I mentioned Chill Penguin specifically because halfway through the stage you'll obtain the leg parts upgrade, and the fun now becomes how hard you can blitz the enemy. On my third playthrough, one of my goals was to see how fast I can run through stages. I don't know if this was intended by the devs, but in the middle of his dash, X's shot will deal more damage to enemies. I for one love it because it caters to the run and gun platforming I mentioned earlier, but makes the Buster more powerful than intended. It doesn't take away from the level design because X1 stages do a great job mixing up their designs to cater to its gameplay. I wasn't sure where to make this point, but I also wanted to mention X1's fantastic soundtrack. Believe it or not, there were a total of 6 composers that worked on X1's soundtrack, including the sound design. Dare I say, X1 is one of the best soundtracks on the SNES. The highway intro is recognizable to anyone who's played X1, and the stage selection's guitar riff and stage start themes gets me pumped up. Some of my favorite tracks are Storm Eagle and Spark Mandrill, of course, Boomer Quanger, which I think is underrated in my opinion, and Instinct Chameleon is another bop as well. Literally the entire soundtrack is fantastic, adding to the gameplay. But to return to the level design, there is not a single level in X1 that I've found genuinely bad. Thanks to X's abilities, some stages offer a great deal of verticality, like Boomer Kuwanger having you ascend a radio tower, or Storm Eagle starting at the base of an airfield with the boss taking place on his airship. Capcom honestly knocked it out of the park with the level design. I love the sections in Armored Armadillo where you ride the minecarts and use the speed to gain a boost of speed by timing your jumps, or the brief section in Instinct Chameleon where you're given a ride armor and you can go to town on the enemies. But not only are the stages great, some stages will experience changes in their level design depending on if a previous Maverick was defeated. By beating Chill Penguin, the Lava and Flame Mammoth stage will freeze, not only removing a level hazard, but allowing you to obtain a heart upgrade. X at the start of the game has a small HP pool. It can be beaten easily if you accidentally choose the wrong Maverick. By obtaining health increases and Dr. Light upgrades, X can become a one-man army, showing a great amount of character growth through gameplay. That being said, my previous point holds true if you go in the correct boss order. You see, while the Mega Man series allows you to tackle bosses in any order you want, there exists a preset path the game nudges you to go on. Mind you, that's not a bad thing, because if anything, it makes repeated playthroughs more fun, like the game's rewarding you for min-maxing and planning out your path. That in turn segues into the order of Mavericks I chose for my playthrough. Thanks to how well structured X1 is, every playthrough can have slight alterations depending on what items you prioritize over the other. In my runs of X1, I always make it a priority to get the upgraded armor as early as possible, and thanks to Chill Penguin and Storm Eagle being easy bosses, you can get half the upgrades as soon as possible. Alongside Flame Mammoth being weak to Storm Tornado and the lava being frozen, you can obtain every upgrade in a single run. From there, I knew my options were very open, but because I prioritized getting Dr. Light upgrades, I had no choice but to fight a boss without their weakness. The reason I chose Boomer Kuwanger instead of Spark Mandrill was because I wanted to get the sub-tank and Spark Mandrill on my first go, without needing to return later. And thanks to Spark Mandrill being an easy boss, I quickly moved on to Armored Armadillo. Then Launch Octopus, who only has one collectible, finishing it off with Instinct Chameleon getting the last upgrades in one fell swoop. Best part about this whole thing is that your playthrough can be entirely different to mine with slight variations to mix it up. I should preface, you will have to backtrack to certain stages to get upgrades. But like I said, if you plan your route ahead of time, you can make it non-existent. It's not as bad as it sounds because like I just spent the last couple of minutes explaining, X1 has fantastic level design. Using new abilities to obtain items that were previously out of your reach makes X1's weapons important for exploration rather than offensive tools. X1's attention to detail is what gives it high replayability, due to how well designed the overall game is. I will say though, challenge runs of X1 like Buster Only or Minimalist runs are a fun way to spice up repeated playthroughs. Definitely on my next playthrough, I love to do a randomizer run to add a bit of chaos and challenge. When X1 released, it reaped all the improvements made during the classic series. X can shoot and jump but comes equipped with a charge shot, unlike Rock who got it by Mega Man 4. I think X's design is a perfect example of how you take a previously established character and evolve it for a new audience. Rock I feel still belongs in the same category as iconic designs like Mario and Kirby, and he has that Astro Boy look going for him. X on the other hand to me has a more militaristic look. He still retains the blue color scheme of Rock and the Buster, but the added detail across the board makes X look more like a soldier. On the other hand, his upgraded armor makes him look like a Gundam. X from a design standpoint appeals to me more, though that could be because I'm older and was probably Capcom's intent. While I'm on the topic of character designs, I'll also go over Zero as well. Zero, just like X, is another win for this game. If you're going to have your new character make a dramatic entrance like Zero, you should make sure the design reflects their depiction in-game. Although we don't see it until X3, Zero's main weapon of choice is his Z-Saber, but in X1 he uses his Z-Buster. To return to X, where X differs from Rock is his abilities. X controls like a diamond in this game. X can perform a wall jump while in midair and hugging a wall. X will slide down until you press the jump button and kick off it. It's simple to master and doesn't have the learning curve, say something like Samus's wall jump from Super Metroid, but it does come in useful during boss fights and traversing levels. X's dash is great for gaining speed and when jumping to get air, doubly so in Launch Octopus's stage. The game doesn't tell you this, but when wall jumping, if you press the dash and the jump button at the same time, X will do what is called the wall dash, and you'll need it to get this heart tank in Spark Mandrill stage. Players who explore stages can find hidden Dr. Light capsules. Chill Penguin and Storm Eagle should be the first stages you complete. In Storm Eagle stage, you can find the helmet upgrade that allows X to break blocks above him. You use it to find collectibles like sub-tanks and heart upgrades, alongside the arm parts upgrade, but by the endgame, its usefulness has run its course. Speaking of the arm parts, they're hands down the best upgrade overall because it unlocks an upgraded charge shot, decimating weak enemies and two-shotting stronger enemies. On top of that, it lets you charge your special weapons, though I never used it a whole lot, only here and there. Finally, there's the chest upgrade that reduces damage by half. That's it. X's upgraded armor is an important part of every X game. The upgrades themselves are basic in the grand scheme of things, however they give X new abilities that expand on the Mega Man formula, and are the highlight of every playthrough. To cycle back to special weapons are a part of every Mega Man game. By defeating a stage's boss, X will copy that Maverick's ability, giving him more firepower. Not only do you have more weapons at your disposal, but bosses are weak to certain weapons. A good tip is to first beat a boss that's easy, then use their weapon against the Maverick it's weak to. Every special weapon runs on limited ammo, but X1, from what I've noticed, is very generous with energy pickups. In a system like this, there will be some special weapons that are better than others. Case in point, the Storm Tornado is the best out of all of them, simply because it does multiple hits of damage. I'll also give a quick mention to the Charge Homing Torpedo and Boomerang Cutter because both are great to use against the bosses they're weak to, and the Spark Shot is great just so you can knock off Armored Armadillo's shell. Others like Fire Wave and Shotgun Ice are below average to say the least. Fire Wave acts like a flamethrower and having the arm parts upgrade will pause the regular attack, and Shotgun Ice's charge attack is only useful in getting this heart tank. Special weapons are fun to use in stages, but the X-Buster was more than enough during regular gameplay. But once I got to the bosses, that changed really quickly. One thing I've always enjoyed in the X series was the designs and character personalities of the Mavericks you fight. In the classic series, Robot Masters took on specific personalities and appearances based on the abilities they had, whereas in the X series, the Mavericks take on an animal motif, and as a result, the design of the Mavericks stands out more prominently. Designs like Storm Eagle, Launch Octopus, and Flame Mammoth demonstrate their personality without telling you anything about them. I'm no artist, but even I understand character designs and silhouettes are meant to give you hints as to a character's personality. I also like how the X series tries to invest more in its world building, because rogue robots that can potentially attack humans is starting to become a real concern in our world, though in the case of the games, they're just bosses you need to defeat. However, researching the individual Mavericks' motivations for joining Sigma was a ton of fun. This is where the PSP remake takes center stage because one of the things it added was dialogue between X and the bosses. Storm Eagle, for example, joined Sigma as repayment for Sigma sparing his life, and in his boss fight, he looks ashamed for betraying his comrades. Others like Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Armored Armadillo, and Launch Octopus joined Sigma because they're loyal to their commander or agree with his views. Scariest of all though, Sting Chameleon, Boomer Coanger, and Flame Mammoth, who did it out of opportunism like Sting Chameleon, or to fulfill their sadistic tendencies like Boomer Coanger and Flame Mammoth, all led by the mastermind Sigma who believes in Reploid supremacy. But how do the bosses stack up during gameplay? X1 does an excellent job of balancing the difficulty of the bosses by not only making some of them intimidating to fight without their weakness, but also creating recognizable patterns in their moves, rewarding the player for skillful play. Thanks to X's moves, bosses will have a variety of attacks they can use that force you to think on the fly. When Stink Chameleon becomes invisible, you'll have to predict where he'll reappear. A viable strategy to keep your distance and knock him off the ceiling with Boomerang Cutter. During my first playthrough, I didn't have Boomer Coanger's weakness, so I had to rely on the X-Buster. It did its job well, but Boomer Coanger will teleport around the room, and if you stay on the ground too much, he'll toss you into the ceiling. But like I went on earlier, this is where special weapons come into the picture. By using the correct special weapon, the hardest bosses become a lot easier or downright cakewalk. Launch Octopus is a rare example where the boss has two weaknesses because Boomerang Cutter can cut off his arms, nullifying his tornado attack. From there, it's using the Rolling Shield to defeat him. However, not all the bosses are perfect. Across the Mega Man series, some bosses have the problem where, when they're hit with their weakness, their attack pattern resets, completely removing any challenge they represent. Case in point being Spark Mandrill, where you can beat him without moving by using his weakness Shotgun Ice. I'd also include Flame Mammoth on that list, not because Storm Tornado makes him easy, but because his room was set on a large conveyor belt, X1 in my opinion has bar none the best selection of Mavericks in the series and adds another layer to X1's replayability. Before we enter Sigma's Fortress, yes, I'll also bring up the Hadouken. If you obtain every collectible in the game and a jump atop the cliff to the end of Armored Armadillo stage a couple of times, X can obtain the ability to use the Hadouken. The Hadouken can one-shot everything in the game, and it's the ultimate screw-you move. The catch is you have to be at full health to use it, and by the time you get it, it's the end game, but who cares? It's a fun Easter egg and worth mentioning when discussing X1. After defeating the final Maverick, Sigma's Fortress is unlocked, paving the way to the final stages. Sigma Fortress 1 in the beginning has you jump on floating platforms with enemies flying in, attempting to knock you back into the bottomless pit. The highlight of this stage is your rematch with Vile, because after Zero sacrifices himself, X uses his new power to defeat Vile, demonstrating how far he's come. Sigma Stage 2 then gives you this cool section at the end, using the right armor to rampage through enemies. The boss of the stage can be very difficult if you used up all of your Chameleon Sting ammo and Storm Eagle, but Storm Eagle is so easy that you realistically should be ready. Thankfully, Chameleon Sting splits into 3 smaller projectiles, with at least one of the shots able to connect to the boss's weak points. Now, I didn't mention this up until this point, but in every Mega Man game, every castle will have a dedicated boss rush to them. Usually, in most cases, it's saved for the second to last stage. However, X1 does something that should have become a series staple, and that's spreading the boss rush across 3 out of the 4 stages, making the final castle a smoother experience. To mention Maverick Hunter X one more time, in that remake, the Mavericks return, except they don't contain the recipient's personality. Instead, they're basically zombies because they have no dialogue and no color in their eyes. Almost like Sigma recreated them in a rush to stop X. Sigma Fortress 4 is where you'll fight the final boss. It has a shaft you ascend with a section you can use to farm your sub-tanks. When battling the final boss, you want to preserve your sub-tanks for the last phase. Sigma will send his dog in the first phase, then battle you himself in the second phase. Sigma's charge attack will deal a ton of damage, but he likes to bounce between the walls, making him very predictable. However, his final phase is against his battle armor. As long as you bait his hands, your excess of sub-tanks and rolling shield ammo will defeat Sigma. Now with Sigma's rebellion ended, X escapes and looks on into the horizon, watching Sigma's castle explode, wondering if the battle is over, or just beginning. I think the best way to cap off this video is to explain why this all works. Mega Man X1 can generally be considered a perfect game. The game's art style, level design, and replayability make it one of the best games on the SNES, and a great start to the X series. There was not a single thing I disliked about X1 even when I tried to find one. What X1 accomplished was not that it was the first entry that got lucky, but a game that was a spiritual successor to the 6 Mega Man games that came before. X1 not only reaped all the benefits that came from the previous Mega Man games, but also established its own identity with its gameplay and presentation. For that, it succeeded, with Mega Man X2 improving upon X1, which will be the next game I'll be covering. With that being said, I'll end the video like I always do, by saying thank you for watching, and take care.